You're standing in a courtroom, not as a defendant just watching. Two people are fighting over who owns a house. One person has the deed, their name is on the title, they paid for it, they live in it. By every normal measure, it's theirs. The other person has a piece of paper too, a different kind of paper, a trust deed. And here's the part that stops you cold: the person with their name on the title loses. The house isn't theirs, it never really was, they were just holding it. This is the quietest secret in wealth building. The one piece of paper that separates how the rich protect everything from how the rest of us lose everything. It's not a stock certificate. It's not a bond. It's not a deed with your name on it. It's a trust deed. And it does something that feels almost illegal the first time you understand it. It lets you own nothing but control everything. Let me show you how this works, because once you see it, you'll never look at wealth the same way again. Most of us have been taught a simple formula for ownership. You buy something, you put your name on it, it's yours. Your car, your house, your bank account, your name means ownership. But here's what they don't tell you: your name also means target. When your name is on something, you are legally exposed. Anyone who wants to take it knows exactly where to look. A lawsuit, a divorce, a creditor, a bad business deal, they all follow the same path. They follow your name. The wealthy learned this lesson a long time ago, so they did something that seems paradoxical. They took their names off everything. They don't own their houses. The trust owns the house. They don't own their businesses. The trust owns the shares. They don't own their investment. The trust owns the portfolio. And yet they live in the house. They control the business. They spend the investment income. How? Because they control the trust, and the trust owns everything. This is the distinction that changes everything: legal ownership versus beneficial control. Let's break down how this actually works, because it's simpler than you think. A trust is just a legal arrangement. 3 roles, that's it. First, there's the settlor. That's the person who creates the trust and puts assets into it, the wealthy person. Second, there's the trustee. That's the person or company who holds legal title to the assets. They're the ones whose name goes on the deed, on the stock certificates, on the bank accounts. Third, there's the beneficiary. That's the person who gets to use and enjoy the assets. The wealthy person again, or their children, or whoever they choose. Now watch what happens when you structure it this way. The wealthy person, let's call him David, creates a trust. He transfers his house, his investments, his business shares into the trust. Legally, he no longer owns any of it. The trust does. David's name comes off everything. But David is the beneficiary of the trust, so he still lives in the house. He still receives the investment income. He still controls the business. Nothing in his daily life changes. He has all the benefits of ownership without any of the legal ownership. And who's the trustee? Maybe a trusted advisor, maybe a family member, maybe a professional trustee company. Their job is simply to follow David's instructions, because David, as the beneficiary, has the power to remove and replace trustees. David owns nothing. David controls everything. Now, why does this matter? Because when David's name is on nothing, there's nothing for creditors to take, nothing for lawsuits to attach to, nothing for ex-spouses to claim, nothing for the government to seize. The assets are in the trust. The trust is a separate legal entity. David is just a beneficiary. You can sue David all day long, but he doesn't own anything. The trust does, and the trust isn't the one being sued. This is the fortress. This is how wealth survives generations. But here's where it gets really interesting. The trust deed isn't just a shield. It's also a tool for control across time. Think about the typical way wealth passes down. Someone dies, their assets go through probate, the government takes a cut, family members fight over what's left. It's messy, public, and expensive. Now watch what happens with a trust. David creates a trust that names his children as beneficiaries. But he doesn't just hand them everything at once, he structures it. Maybe they get income starting at age 25. Maybe they get access to principal at 30, 35, and 40. Maybe they only get distributions if they meet certain conditions: graduating college, starting a business, staying married. David is dead. But his control lives on. The trust deed is his voice, reaching across decades, making sure his wealth is used the way he wanted. This is the piece of paper that lets the wealthy reach from the grave. And it's not just about controlling children. It's about protecting them from themselves, from predators, from bad marriages, from bad decisions. Because the assets aren't in their names either. They're in the trust. So if a child gets divorced, the ex-spouse can't take half the trust assets. They're not owned by the child is just a beneficiary. The trust keeps everything safe for the next generation. Now you might be thinking, this sounds like a loophole, a way to hide from creditors, from the government, from responsibility. And you'd be half right, it is a way to protect assets. But it's not a loophole, it's a legal structure that's been around for centuries. And here's the part that matters, it only works if it's done right. Because if you retain too much control, the trust collapses. The courts look through it and say, this isn't a real trust, you still own everything, those assets are yours. This is exactly what happened in one of the most famous trust cases in recent history. A Russian billionaire named Sergei Pugachev thought he'd protected his assets by putting them in 5 New Zealand trusts. He was the settlor, he was a beneficiary. He made himself the protector of the trusts with powers to veto distributions and remove trustees. When his creditors came after him, he said, I don't own anything, the trusts do. The court looked at the trust deeds. They looked at how much control Pugachev had retained, and they ruled that the trusts were illusory. In reality, Pugachev had never given up ownership. The trusts were just a facade. The lesson: a trust only works if you genuinely give up legal ownership. You can't have it both ways. You can't want the protection of not owning assets while still pulling all the strings like a puppet master. The wealthy who do this right understand the balance. They create structures where control is real but indirect, where they're beneficiaries, not owners, where the trustee has genuine discretion, even if that trustee is someone they trust implicitly. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out in everyday life. Imagine 2 business owners, same industry, same revenue, same net worth. The first owner has everything in his own name. His house, his cars, his business shares, his investment accounts, all with his name on them. One day, someone slips in his store, they sue. And because his name is on everything, everything is at risk. The business, the house, the savings, all exposed. One lawsuit and decades of work can disappear. The second owner has the same assets, but they're structured differently. The business is owned by a trust. The house is owned by a trust. The investments are in another trust. He's just a beneficiary. Someone slips in his store, they sue, they win a judgment, but against whom? The business is owned by a trust. The trust isn't the defendant. The owner doesn't personally own anything. The judgment attaches to nothing. The plaintiff's lawyers spend years trying to pierce the corporate veil, trying to prove that the trusts are shams, that the owner really controls everything. But if it's structured right, if the owner has genuinely ceded legal ownership, if the trustees are independent and follow proper procedures, the wall holds. This isn't about being dishonest, it's about being structured. It's about recognizing that putting your name on everything is the financial equivalent of walking through a bad neighborhood wearing a sign that says, "Rob me." Now, here's where we need to be careful, because this can sound like something it's not. This isn't about hiding money offshore to avoid taxes. It's not about defrauding creditors. It's about legitimate legal protection of what you've built. The wealthy use trusts for the same reason you lock your front door. Not because you're planning to be robbed, but because you recognize that the world has risks and it's foolish not to protect against them. And here's the thing, you don't need to be a billionaire to use this. Trusts aren't just for the ultra-wealthy. They're for anyone who owns a home, has savings, wants to protect their family. A simple revocable living trust costs a few $1,000s to set up and does one critical thing. It keeps your assets out of probate when you die. No public court process, no fighting among heirs, no government taking a cut before your kids get what you left them. That's the entry level. Then there are irrevocable trusts, asset protection trusts, dynasty trusts that last for generations. Each layer adds more protection, more control, more permanence. The principle is the same at every level: separate legal ownership from beneficial control. Put the assets in a container that isn't you. Be the beneficiary, not the owner. Let's zoom out for a moment and see the bigger picture. Most of us are taught to build wealth by accumulating things with our names on them. A house with your name on the deed, a car with your name on the title, a bank account with your name on the statements. This feels like progress, it feels like ownership, it feels like success. But from a certain altitude, it looks different. It looks like exposure. It looks like a target painted on everything you've built. It looks like a system designed to make you vulnerable while making you feel secure. The wealthy learned long ago that true wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you control. A billionaire doesn't need to own a building, they need to control the income from it. They don't need to own a company, they need to control the board that runs it. They don't need their name on assets, they need the legal structures that hold those assets to answer to them. This is the one piece of paper that makes it all possible, the trust deed. It's not exciting, it's not flashy. You can't drive it or show it to your friends. But it's the difference between wealth that lasts generations and wealth that disappears in one bad lawsuit, one divorce, one mistake. The wealthy own nothing. And because they own nothing, nothing can be taken from them, but they control everything. And because they control everything, they have everything they need. So here's the question the next time you look at something you own. Is your name on it a badge of honor or a bull's? Because in the end, the safest place for your wealth isn't in your name. It's in a structure designed to protect it. A structure where you're not the owner, but the beneficiary, not the target, but the one in control. The wealthy figured this out a long time ago. The question is, when will you?